In the baking heat of the Mongolian Gobi, a small field team brushed sand from a cluster of eggs shaped like elongated lemons. Beside them lay the skeleton of a strange theropod with a parrot-like beak, a short skull crest, and long arms folded toward the nest. My name is Myra, a science communication specialist, and today I want to tell you the story of how this animal was accused, convicted by assumption, and finally redeemed by evidence. In 1923, during the Central Asiatic expeditions led by Roy Chapman Andrews, paleontologists uncovered a partial skeleton near a nest of eggs at a site called Jadokta. The creature's skull lacked teeth and ended in a curved bill. To early eyes, it looked perfectly designed for snatching fragile shells. They named it Oviraptor, the egg seizer, and even gave the species a jab at the neighbors, Velociraptors, as if to say it loved the eggs of Protoceratops, the common horned dinosaur of those beds. Newspapers loved the angle. A villain, a thief. A dinosaur caught in the act. The truth, as truth often does in paleontology, took decades to surface, one scrape of the brush at a time. I spent a season at a Gobi camp with Naran, a local fossil hunter whose grandfather had watched those early expeditions pass like caravans of dreams. Naran taught me how wind writes in layers, how a dune can both reveal and entomb in a single storm. When we hiked to a low ridge, I imagined the scene almost 100 years earlier. One quick snapshot of bones beside eggs, and the mind rushes to connect dots that feel obvious. But what feels obvious is not always right. We didn't yet understand that many small, bird-like theropods were devoted parents. We didn't know their nests were arranged in elegant rings, with eggs tilted like wine bottles in a rack, and that adults could crouch over them with forelimbs spread like wings. Back in the 1920s, scientists had great skill and very little context, and context is everything. Picture Oviraptor in life, not a scowling burglar but a nimble, feathered creature, 2 meters long with a stiff tail acting like a balancing pole. It had a beak strong enough to crack shellfish or chop plants, a skull roof that sometimes carried a crest, and hands capable of precise movements. Its closest relatives belong to a family we now call Oviraptorosaurs, Maniraptoran theropods on the birdwood branch of the dinosaur tree. That branch includes animals that brooded, flashed display feathers, and likely made complex vocal calls. Still, for much of the 20th century, the legend stuck. Children learned about the egg thief. Museum labels repeated the story, and artists painted Oviraptor lunging toward another dinosaur's nest. When I began giving talks, I used this tale as a caution light. Fossils are data, stories are interpretations. With a single specimen, the most compelling narrative can win even when it's wrong. Meanwhile, new sites in the Gobi waited quietly under sun and wind, holding the evidence that would turn a thief into a parent. A storm one afternoon blew straight through our camp, hissing past tent ropes, sanding the enamel off our cups, and bearing boot prints faster than we could make them. Naran laughed and said the desert loves to rewrite. That night in the mess tent, our lead paleontologist, Dr. Ellis, told us about the specimens that finally changed the conversation in the 1990s. Skeletons of Oviraptorids preserved atop nests, arms outstretched, skulls tucked, exactly like birds sitting tight through a squall. Imagine dying like that, refusing to abandon the offspring beneath you. The word monster feels smaller after you hear it. Even the eggs themselves started talking. The shells are thick, with microscopic pores spaced for open-air incubation, not burial. Their shape and texture matched the adult who sat on them. And when new imaging and painstaking preparation began to show tiny embryonic bones curled inside, they didn't belong to Protoceratops at all. They belonged to the so-called thief. The desert had not staged a crime scene. It had preserved a family portrait, frozen in the harshest of circumstances. Science would have to apologize, and then update the textbooks. This is where our story truly begins, with a name heavy with accusation and a body posture heavy with care, and with the reminder that evidence, given time, can change almost anything we think we know. Tomorrow we'll walk from that first accusation to the finds that overturned it, from Gobi field camps to labs where eggshells whisper under microscopes. I want you to meet the people who wrestled with those clues, the doubts they carried, and the moments when a single detail, the tilt of an egg or the curve of a tiny jaw, made their hearts race. Oviraptor's story ain't only about a dinosaur. It's about how science grows up, admits uncertainty, and learns to see care where it once imagined a crime. By the end, you'll see why the thief became a symbol of humility, patience, and stronger evidence. When the first brooding oviraptorids were described in the 1990s, they felt like time-lapse film suddenly snapping into focus. The adult lay over a circular nest, arms sprawled around the eggs like a living umbrella, tail anchored, neck curved so the head faced forward as if watching the horizon. Nearby, more nests showed the same pattern, eggs arranged in pairs in a ring, then another ring on top, tilted outward to leave space for the parent's body in the middle. That paired layout told an intimate story about biology. Unlike birds, which lay from a single oviduct, these dinosaurs likely produced 2 eggs at a time, one from each side, building the ring in careful sequence. And the eggs were not anonymous. Thin slices under microscopes revealed microstructure and pores compatible with open nests. In some, delicate embryonic bones matched the adult who sat above them, a beak little theropod, not the horned neighbor. In the lab, our preparator, Lena, lifted her hands when she talked, palms up, fingers trembling from the habit of holding breath as she etched rock from bone. She told me that trust in science is not blind. It is earned by practices anyone can learn, document, test, revise, repeat. Her own revision came after months with a nest slab where the eggs seemed featureless. Then one morning she noticed a faint crescenta jawline and later a splay of embryonic ribs like threads of cinnamon. I watched her grin like someone hearing a heartbeat for the first time. Meanwhile, sedimentology painted the last moments. Many brooding adults were buried rapidly, maybe by collapsing dunes or sudden storms, caught in the posture of care. The tragedy is palpable, yet it gives us the gift of behavior in stone. Soft tissues rarely fossilize, so posture, arrangement, and context become our verbs, our adverbs, our stage directions. In Oviraptor's case, the stage directions are unmistakable. Arms out, fingers splayed, the body center over the nest hollow, eggs kept warm by contact and by heat of the chest. Modern birds brood the same way, and their feathers create a warm boundary layer. It is very likely that Oviraptorids, which belong to the feathered branch of theropods, used plumage to shield and insulate their clutches. Some even carried ornate head crests, probably for display, and fans of tail feathers that could have signaled fitness to mates. Suddenly, the old newspaper caricature looks paper-thin. The beak that once screamed thief now reads as a multi-purpose tool, good for cracking mollusks, clipping vegetation, maybe breaking tough seed pods, and printing feathers during long bouts on the nest. In camp, Dr. Ellis liked to ask a simple question at dinner. What would change your mind? Each of us had to propose a test that could make our favorite idea false. For the egg thief narrative, the tests arrived one after another. Eggs with embryonic oviraptorid bones. Adults preserved squarely atop clutches, eggshell chemistry hinting at exposure to air, and even traces of pigments that point to open nests. Every test that mattered pointed away from theft and toward parenting. Naran nodded along and said, "Remember the desert's motto. Rewrite. Don't assume." I think about that when I teach young scientists who crave certainty. Certainty may feel safe, but growth lives in the questions. We also learned that these animals did not dump a chaotic pile of eggs. They placed them with precision, constructing a thermal gradient so embryos could develop evenly. When a colleague modeled heat flow across a ring, the pattern kept the center open and the eggs warm without baking them, a clever trick in a place where midday sun punishes and night steals warmth. One specimen even preserved the adult's forearm bones in position suggesting the spread of feathers, as if embracing a storm. Close your eyes and you can hear wind tearing across the sand, the low weight of the animal pressing down, and a heartbeat in the eggs answering with patience. If there is a single message from this chapter, it is that anatomy alone misled us. Context redeemed the truth. An animal cannot be understood only by the things it could do. We must also ask what it chose to do. Oviraptor chose to sit, to guard, to keep still when running away might have saved its life, and that choice is written in rock as clearly as any headline. Later work showed some Oviraptorosaur embryos curled into a pre-hatching tuck like modern chicks, a behavior that helps time that first push into the world. Other studies reported blue-green pigments in certain Oviraptorid eggs, colors that likely camouflaged open nests and may have signaled to mates. Lena taped a photo of one egg by her microscope with a note, "Ask the right question." She picked up cafe shifts and still arrived at dawn to coax whispers from Stone. Naran sent his stipend home so his sister could buy school books. Their persistence made me see patience as form of care, and the fossils began to read like a family diary. So what do we know now? Nearly a century after the first accusation and decades after the first exonerating nests, Oviraptor and its kin were Maniraptoran theropods, close to the line that leads to birds. They likely wore feathers, brooded open nests, and laid eggs in patient sequences, 2 at a time, building ring upon ring as their bodies allowed. The name Oviraptor velociraptor survived, but the meaning flipped. The egg Caesar was not a robber of ceratopsian eggs. It was the guardian of its own. That reversal is not just a trivia fact. It is a compass for how we should think. When evidence changes, we do not cling to the tale we like. We change our minds. Biology also speaks to diet. A strong, toothless beak hints at a varied menu. Hard fruit, seeds, shellfish, perhaps small vertebrates taken opportunistically. Jaw mechanics suggest bite forces suitable for cracking and shearing, and where textures on beaks from some relatives imply frequent contact with tough food. In ecosystems full of sand, scrub, and stream-side oases, a generalist strategy would have been powerful. That variety helps explain why Oviraptorids thrived alongside larger predators and herds of horned herbivores. Behavioral evidence keeps expanding too. Brooding adults froze in lifelike poses, embryos tucked like chicks, eggshell chemistry showing pigments that make sense in exposed nests, and even hints that clutch sizes and ring geometry could regulate warmth and oxygen. Everything points to extended parental investment. I think of Dr. Ellis's dinner question, "What would change your mind?" and I imagine the old headline writer sitting across from a brooding dinosaur while grains of sand fall like seconds from the sky. What would change your mind now? Maybe the smell of a warm nest. Maybe the rhythm of a parent's breath. Fieldwork is full of humbling moments like that. On our last day in camp, the wind finally slowed, and we hiked to a knoll overlooking low badlands cut by dry washies. Naran set down his pack and pointed to a stripe of rock where eggs eroded out like beads on a string. Some had hatched long ago. Their ends were popped off like lids, a classic sign of emergence. Others were unbroken. That night we logged coordinates, wrapped the area in flags, and laughed at how official the flags looked in a place that belongs mostly to wind. Back in the city, I visited a classroom and told this story to a group of 4th graders. When I explained the misinterpretation, a girl raised her hand and said, "So the newspaper dinosaur needs to say sorry?" "Yes," I said, "and then keep learning." That became my favorite summary of the scientific method. Say sorry when you're wrong, and keep learning. There is more coming, too. New imaging lets us see growth lines, air spaces, and tiny teeth in embryos of other species, and that comparative context reinforces the bird connection. Computers simulate the heat and airflow inside nests under desert sun and evening chill. Geochemists test for proteins and pigments in ancient shells. Even artists shape knowledge, because when a painter adds a fan of tail feathers to an Oviraptor crouching on a nest, they invite the public to imagine parenting, not plunder. If you are a parent, a teacher, or simply someone who has stood still for the sake of a fragile hope, you already know the secret this dinosaur kept for us. Care leaves traces. Sometimes those traces are cradled in rock. Sometimes they live in the way we hold a quiet room. Oviraptor's greatest legacy is not the beak or the crest. It is the patient circle it drew with its own body, making a weatherproof promise around the future. The egg thief wasn't a criminal. It was a good parent doing the bravest thing any animal can do in a world built of change. Stay. Stay while the wind howls. Stay while the sky blinds. Stay because the next generation is pressing outward with tiny bones and enormous possibility. If that doesn't redefine heroism, I don't know what does. So the next time you hear a confident story built from a single snapshot, think of a beaked dinosaur in a storm, arms spread, eyes half closed, listening for the faintest rustle from the eggs below. Ask what would change your mind, then welcome every honest answer. In science, humility is not a weakness, it is a survival trait. And in the Gobi, where dunes rewrite their own lines every season, humility is also the best field guide we have. Let it lead you from accusation to understanding, from haste to patience, from a catchy label to a fuller truth. That is the arc of Oviraptor's story, and if we are lucky, it will be the arc of ours as well. Before we close, picture one more scene. An embryo curled inside its shell, head tucked just so, matching modern birds. That posture crossed millions of years to reach us, a quiet signature that says these were not monsters. When you visit a museum, look for the ring nests and the sitting adults. Stand there a moment and trade the old headline for a heartbeat.